Today's episode is brought to you by Media for All, which was set up to help encourage more Black, Asian, and other ethnic talent into media, and to provide a support and mentoring network to ensure talent flourishes in the media industry that we all love. If you're looking for a mentor or would like to mentor young ethnic talent, check them out at mediaforall.org.uk, and it is all 100% free. Hello and welcome to The Shiny New Object. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week or so, I have the pleasure and the absolute privilege to interview our industry's leaders about their vision of the future of the industry. And I'm on a call with Quinn O'Brien, who is Vice President, Global Marketing at Lenovo. Quinn, for those listeners who don't know who you are and what you do, could you give them a bit of an overview?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Tom. So I've been in marketing for probably about 25 years, so a long time. I started out on the agency side and worked most of that on the agency side. I started out in Boston, working for some really small agencies and a really big agency in Boston, and then moved to New York and worked for Ogilvy, and probably spent most of my agency career at Ogilvy working on IBM and a range of other accounts. I left there, founded a small agency that grew into a big agency, and then about 8 years ago, left the agency world and came over to Lenovo. So I've been at Lenovo for about 8 years and started out really focused on branding specifically and how to manage and build the Lenovo brand, and have kind of steadily expanded that out and now look after corporate marketing for the company.
And I understand from chatting before that this is your 8th or 9th podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, I have. It's been something that just in the last 12 months, I know everyone else is experiencing the same, of working from home and trying to balance things. It's been a really nice outlet and ability to still talk about work, but to not talk about kind of the stuff I have going on day to day, but to broaden it out a little bit and gain some perspective for myself, and hopefully, talk about things that are interesting. So it in some ways has kept me sane and hopefully added some value.
Well, I think with that many podcast appearances, you're probably on target to do your own show next. So
that is not my goal, but I do enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to this.
So an interesting career. Definitely the first person who's been on this podcast, and 100 or so guests that's set up their agency, scaled it, and then gone back in on the other side. So I'm really keen to find out more about your career, but specifically, what has been the biggest fuck up of your career to date that you absolutely hated yourself for, but made you the man you are?
In the podcasts I've done, no one's ever asked me that. So that is a good question to start with. I think actually, to be honest, it probably goes to before I started in the first agency I worked for. I started out, and I think probably the biggest fuck up I had was I started out really focused on being a lawyer. And I had set my sights from a very young age, probably 12, on being a corporate lawyer. And the reason it was a fuck up was I did it for just completely the wrong reasons. I went into it. There was a TV show on at the time that really glamorized lawyers. And there was a guy,
Which show was that?
It was called LA Law.
Right.
And there was an actor on the show who, in my 12-year-old mind, was the person I wanted to be in the world. And he was, he drove a nice car. He was a, handsome fellow, ladies liked him. He went to nice restaurants. He was just living a really good life in my view. And so at that age, I was going, all right, I want to be this guy. I want to be Corbin Bernsen on LA Law. Arnie Becker was his character. And, even down to like he drove a Porsche. I wanted to drive a Porsche. Like I really had this materialistic view on I want to be this guy. Barring the fact, as all of your listeners will recognize he's not a real person. So that was the first fuck up, was modeling myself off a guy who was not real. But also that sort of led from I wanted to be like him to I want to be a lawyer, which is another, not a great jump. And so it went all the way through college where, I went pre-law in college and was taking law classes. And it got up to a point where I actually took my second semester of my sophomore year. I took a class with a professor who, it was his last semester teaching. And he said at the start of class, I am going to make it my point as a benefit to the legal community to weed out those of you who are not doing this for the right reason. And I got weeded out within like 30 seconds. We sat down one-on-one and he said, tell me about why you want to be a lawyer. And I told that exact same story, but with no irony to it. Like just going like, you're a lawyer. You must have watched LA Law. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I want to be Arnie Becker. Here's why. And he was just horrified. And it was a really great moment because it wasn't in the time, I was panicked, but it was a really great moment in hindsight because he really just said, you're an idiot. This is exactly the wrong reason to choose a career. And he kind of painted based on my grades, which were not great, and my reason for wanting to be a lawyer, what my career in law would be like. And it was kind of the opposite of Arnie Becker. It was going to be a disaster. And I took it very seriously because it was the first time that I still felt like a kid. It was the first time that an adult had really focused on me and said, you're an idiot, don't do that. So it led to a panic, and it led to me going out and starting to talk to people in other career fields. And I got some really good advice. And I talked to, an IT guy, I talked to a finance person, I talked to someone in HR, and then I talked to someone in marketing. And she was actually in the marketing department at Xerox. And it was funny because I rolled in, I talked to her about marketing, and I was like, this is it. Like I got that feeling where I was like, these are my people. This is the type of thing I want to do. And she was like, okay, I think you'd be great in marketing, but I don't see you in a corporate marketing world. I see you very much in the agency side. And so she introduced me to her agency, and I went in and met with a guy in the agency, and that's when it clicked. And I was like, all right, that's the path I want to go on. And part of it, again, it was just the vibe in the agency. It was what this guy talked about that he did on a daily basis. It was the clients that he worked on. I just could see myself, and I had spent so much time panicking over the last 3 to 4 months of going, I've got to find something that's right for me. And it just clicked. It was that moment where I go, all right, this is actually right. This is so true to who I am and what gets me out of bed in the morning and what I'm passionate about, that I completely redirected at that point and went from wanting to be a lawyer to wanting to be working in an ad agency, and kind of spent the next 2 years of college trying to catch up, trying to understand what advertising was, what marketing was, and really focus myself as much as possible on getting in there. So it was a fuck up from age 12 to probably midway through college, just one continual fuck up. And then a really valued piece of advice that flipped me around.
So assuming that someone has worked out that they do want to be in the industry, what advice would you give to a student that wants to make their mark, get hired and get ahead?
That's a really good question. I think, and I talk a lot to students, so I've got as much of a perspective on that student mindset of the people as I could, as far removed as I am from it. But I think if I'm talking to someone who's just coming out of college, who's looking at that first job, the advice I'd give them would be worry a lot less about what company you work for, what your title is, what your salary is. Worry a lot more about who you work for. Not the company, but the person sitting across from you who will be your first boss. Because at the end of the day, to me, that first job is about getting your feet under you, getting acclimated to what it actually is like to go from college to a job, understanding what it means to go to work, to, it's just the kind of the blocking and tackling of becoming a worker.
And what qualities would you look for in that boss?
Someone who you feel like will have your best interests at heart. And that's not a specific quality that you can easily point to. It's more of a sense that you get. But it's your I don't want to be overly dramatic about it, but your success in the future and your happiness relies a lot on whether that person that you start working for really sees you as someone to nurture and grow, or sees you as a means to their end that they're going to load work on, and they don't really care. If you get someone who really cares, who looks at you and goes, I'm hiring someone who I'm going to nurture and turn into a true marketer, and then you're in great shape. No matter who you're working for, whether you're working for a small agency, a large agency, whether you're working in a marketing department of a company, no matter what industry you're working for, you'll be fine, because that person is going to get you through the hard times because that transition from college to that first job is really tough. And they're going to be the ones who sit with you and talk to you, who give you the really valuable feedback, who aren't afraid to say, you're messing this up. You got to really excel in this area. You got to focus on that area. They're going to coach you. Like if you get a quality person sitting above you, managing you in that first role, that is the thing that is going to make you love the industry. That's the thing that's going to help you to focus. And that's the thing that's ultimately going to help you to be a good leader and manager, because you're going to always remember that person, their style, how they worked. After that second job, it's almost less important, because you always want to work for someone good, but you've got your feet under you at that point, and you're starting to get some expertise. You're starting to focus. You're starting to point yourself in a direction that's really right for you as a career, and you're starting to be able to own your own destiny. I feel like it's funny. My daughter is really into animal science and wants to study that in college, and so for her birthday, she asked for an incubator where you raise chicks, and you see these chicks hatch and come out of that egg, and they're just like staggering around for the first couple of days, like no idea where they are, incredibly vulnerable. And then they start to turn in and mature and become chickens. I never thought I'd have that example, but we've now raised 11 chickens. So
Wow.
I've done that in the pandemic too. But it's interesting. I almost see, like, when you first come out of college, you're that incredibly vulnerable, newly formed being that needs someone to take care of you.
So I'm curious to know, thinking about these young chicks in the industry, let's carry on the analogy. What's the best kind of short piece of advice that you've heard that you would pass on to them? Or actually, not even the young chickens, but the fully formed chickens. Like, what is that killer bit of advice, that your top marketing tip?
I worked for a guy for probably 4 years here at Lenovo named David Roman. And he had a really interesting background. He was our global CMO, really interesting background. He was Steve Jobs' ad guy. So he was the head of advertising for Apple when Steve Jobs was there. And really, I think, developed a lot of his perspective on advertising and marketing from that experience, but also went on to HP and NVIDIA and a bunch of other companies. So really seasoned exec, seasoned marketer, but had a really interesting perspective. And the advice, and really it wasn't a nugget of advice, it was kind of his philosophy on marketing, was what he called wow marketing. And the essence of it was, if the thing you're doing isn't going to make someone say wow, whether it's wow, that's funny, wow, that's interesting, wow, that's thoughtful, wow, that makes me cry, it's not worth doing. And you'll know that from very early on. If the team that's working on the project just can't wait to get it into market and is driven by this thing's going to be amazing, then it's the right thing to be doing. Because when it gets out there, people are going to look at it and go, wow, that's really something. But so much of what we do as marketers isn't that. It's so much of it is ticking boxes, filling slots in media plans, doing what others want. And if you're really, his big push was to really get in touch with your gut, and which is what he got from Steve Jobs. Get in touch with your gut, really look at what you're doing, and really assess whether anyone's ever going to say wow to that thing. And if they're not, figure that out early, kill it, do something different. And so it became this kind of mantra internally, where you would look at it and you'd look at anything you're doing and go, does it have that wow factor? And it's funny because it's kind of a trite thing. He was not a trite guy. Like, he was very, thoughtful and deep and serious, but we would have these conversations about going like, does it have the wow factor? And if it didn't, we had no fear of killing it. So my advice would be, don't get into that mode where you're churning things out ever. Always stay pure to your gut and look and go, will it make someone say wow? And again, no matter what it is, whether it's a social post, whether it's a strategy brief that you're going to put in front of the director of strategy, like, are they going to read it and go, wow, that is thoughtful, like, that is sharp? No matter what you're doing, always go for that reaction, and you won't go wrong.
That is a great bit of advice. This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with Madfest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from Madfest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. We're going to move on now to your shiny new object, which is the changing role of agencies. So I think I know what that means, but can you explain to the listeners why is that your shiny new object, and what's going to happen next?
It's funny. I spent a lot of time in agencies, like I said, both small and large, digital and traditional, startups and really established agencies, local and global. So I got a really good sense of the world of agencies. And then I went over to the client side and got a different perspective. So got to really look at an agency relationship from the other side. And you couple that with the way the world's changed in marketing, where it's gone from, when I first started out, it was slower and it was definitely more traditional. And it was, as a client, our clients would look at us and go, when you start a job in a marketing department on a client side, you need an ad agency, you need a digital agency, you need a media agency, you need a PR agency. Like that, you'd walk in the door as a client and go, all right, who's my ad agency? There was no question of like, do I need one? It was, I need one, who is it? And the world's changed today. A lot of clients are bringing a lot of work in-house. A lot of them are doing it for different reasons. Some are doing it because they can save money. Some are doing it because they want to own their strategic IP. They don't want to outsource it to agencies. So there's a lot of different reasons why clients are bringing work in-house, but it is a trend, and it's a lot of agencies are really struggling, I know right now, with figuring out what's their reason for being, what's the hook that they can put into a client that will get them in the door, that will build that business. And so I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about, because I think, I've heard people posit that, agencies are dead and it's all going in-house. And I definitely do not think that is true. I've heard people say that, the role of agencies will be as specialists in the future, that there is no longer a role for big generalist agencies. And I don't think that's true. But I think it's more nuanced than both of those. But I do think that the role of agencies in a client's world has changed and is continuing to change pretty dramatically.
So if there's an agency that's trying to get you to say, wow, and are a future focused organization, so taking into account what you've just said, What are you looking for? What is going to make you say, wow?
So I think what in the past, so 15 years ago, what would have, I think a lot of age, or maybe 10 years ago, I think the thing that agencies did that made clients say, wow, was they would show up with their thing. So if you're a creative agency, you would show up with just a brilliant creative campaign. And I worked on that. I mean, I did a lot of new business when I was at Ogilvy, and the thing, it's funny to I'll say this, but you had a shiny object. Like you would walk in the door and go, hey, we're new to you, but here's the campaign that we think is right for you. If you're a digital agency, you would walk in and go, hey, we're a digital agency. We're new to this relationship. Here's a digital marketing strategy that we think is really right for you. And it's the old, like, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, and there was a lot of success there. I mean, clients were going, oh, all right, great. Like, I'll take that. I think the world has changed now that clients are much more comfortable doing things themselves. And now that agencies have experienced a lot of churn, and there are a lot of agency people, unfortunately, who are on the street and are open to coming over to clients. Clients are becoming much more discerning, I think. I don't think, I'll switch to my perspective rather than talking in general. What I look for, what makes me say, wow, is when an agency walks in the door and wants to just talk about my problems and wants to just talk about what I need, what are the challenges I'm facing, what does success look like in my business? And that's the end of the conversation. Like we have that conversation, and then they come back and go, all right, let's have another meeting. We've thought a bit about what you said. Let's talk more about your challenges and what your issues are and what success looks like for you. And we have another meeting, and I start to go, these people they get it. Like, and we're starting to edge towards what's the answer? What's the solution I need? But it's a very consultative sell. It's very much focused on me, my business. It's not coming with the answer. And I've found that there are very few agencies I've dealt with who do that. There's still very much a tendency to go, this is what we're good at. Let us talk to you about what we're good at. And I think that the move in-house has caused a panic in agencies that for a lot of them has made them double down on that thing that they do. So they're almost like, all right, we've got to get sharper about it. If I'm a digital media agency, I've got to really hone my credentials. I've got to really sharpen. Hey client, here's the digital thing that I offer. And I want to be as clear and precise and priced properly on that digital thing. And they're coming at me with that. And I'm going, well, why do you think I need that? Like, I may think I need that, but you haven't done it. You haven't spent any time understanding me, my business, my needs. You're just coming telling me, here's a thing. I think you need it. And so I think there's this horrible cycle that's going on where agencies are realizing that clients are bringing stuff in-house. They're panicking and going, we have to become specialized in something so that we can really fit into that niche that clients still outsource. And so they're coming with this really niche offering, and it's not what we want. It's what I want. I want a partner. I want someone who's going to walk in the door. I'll give you an example. We work with an agency right now who's been great, and I was introduced to them through a prior relationship. I didn't think I needed an agency. I thought we were covering most of what we needed in-house. And I sat with their principal, and he basically said, what's your biggest issue? And I started kind of rambling on about it. And he was really quite aggressive about it and going, no, if you had $1 to place on solving a problem, where would you place it? And I was like, interesting. And he really kind of shepherded me through to, you know what I think I actually need? I think I actually need this. Like this is my problem and this would solve it. And it was a beautiful moment because then he was like, you know what, we do that. Like we have that here, here's what it is. Here's who runs it and here's how much it costs. And we're doing a lot of that with him right now. And so it was only through that, taking the time, having the patience and being the right mindset to come in and really spend time with me, that I would go, yeah, okay, I got that. And I think there are still going to be agencies that can never be replicated internally. So a global media buying agency can still rock up to us and go, hey, we spend, or we buy $50 billion worth of media for our clients. And so we can offer you this level of discount on your rate that no one else can offer. We're never going to be able to do that. So those sort of offerings will always outsource. The very, very specialized stuff that, we will probably still continue to outsource. But
So there's one,
the bulk of the agency world, I don't see a need for their thing. I see a need for really smart partners who can come have those conversations with me.
So the idea of the consultative sell, if you like, and the agency principal, talking you through, it sounds fantastic. And I, having worked at agencies for years, know that there's so many people in all of those agencies that would love to consult with someone in your position, whether it's Lenovo or at any company of that size. That would be an amazing meeting to get. And I hear you absolutely that showing up with the shiny new object and doubling down on that isn't necessarily the right way to go, but to ask you about your problems, what your challenges is the right way to go. But the issues that agencies will say that are listening to this is, how do I even get in that room? You need something to get into that room, and just being interesting and having the ability to ask that question isn't making anyone unique. Like, anyone could ask that question. Obviously the answers would be different. So I'm curious to know, what is it that gets on your radar to even get someone in that position?
Well, I challenge one thing you said, which is that I don't think that I don't think that most senior account people within agencies have the background to ask the right questions. I think having been a senior account person in an agency, I wouldn't have. I think the people who ask the right questions are the ones who have worked on both sides. So I think the idea of agencies really looking at people who have worked on the client side and putting them in very seasoned roles and very senior roles within the agency would be a fabulous move. For me to sit down with someone who is at a large agency, who is pitching me on their business, but who has sat in my seat at P&G, at Unilever, at HP, at Dell, at Apple, at a big company, but now really is repping the agency, but is able to come in and have the conversations that isn't necessarily about marketing, that is about business, that's about what's your business trying to do, what's your product development cycle, what's your roadmap look like, how are you going to drive margin, how are you going to drive premium, like all these conversations that generally agency leads, they don't start that far back. And it's not something you can necessarily, kind of train them on. It's something that they have to live. So I do think that the ability of an agency lead or an agency principal or an account lead to have the right conversations is it's quite a specialized thing. And I think one thing agencies could do is really look at those people who are walking in the room with clients and make sure that they have a true ability to empathize and from their experience. So I think that's one thing, which is, I think that you really need to focus on who those people are. But in terms of getting in the door, it's like any networking. It's like getting a job. When my counterpart, who I used to work with at another company, calls me and goes, "You got to talk to this agency. They're brilliant," or "You've got to talk to this woman. She's sharp." That gets a meeting immediately. Like that sort of referral. So the idea of having, as an agency person, having your current clients refer you to other clients is I won't say the only way to get in there, but almost the only way to get in there. Because anything else feels like, all right, why would I have this meeting? What is it about you that's different from the other 15 agencies who are all reaching out on LinkedIn or, cold calling or whatever it is? But if it's a trusted person on my side going, "You got to talk to this woman, she's brilliant," every time I'd take that.
Quinn, that is an excellent comment. But unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. So I always ask this question at the end of the podcast, but it's going to sound really weird in the context of the last couple of minutes of our chat. But I always ask, what makes a really great LinkedIn message to you that you're likely to respond to?
I think that it's got to be something with context. It's sort of similar to what we've been talking about. I get a lot of LinkedIn messages that are just, hey, I run this network of digital agencies. I think we could be really relevant to you. Would love to talk, and have no interest. I got one the other day that the first line it just said Arnie Becker, which is the name of the guy on LA Law who I wanted to be. And I read it and I responded to it because the person had listened to a podcast that I was on, had heard that story, had registered it, and now was, I'll say, smart enough to be using that as the hook to go, oh, hang on a sec. All right, this is interesting. I want to read this. Now, they actually had a really interesting thing that they wanted to talk about. So you can't just, you can't cheat it. But using that, it's marketing, using that hook of that stopped me, where it's funny, I didn't even think of that, but it's like, I had that wow moment where I was like,
yeah,
wow, that person really thought this one through. Like, that's pretty funny, like, well done. And so it was just really good marketing on their part. They hooked me. And then the thing they wanted to talk about was relevant as well. They'd gone through my background and saw what I was doing at Lenovo in some depth and just came out and said, hey, I think this might be a gap for you. We fill that gap. Are you interested? And so I was kind of like, all right, that was clever. And this person seems like someone who might be someone I could have that sort of deeper conversation with. And Brilliant. So I think that's really spend your time, do some research, and then try to find that wow hook that's going to make someone go, that's clever. Like, that's really good. I want to learn more about this person.
So ironically, it was a personalized digital ad that got through to you.
Yeah, totally. Marketing works. Thank God.
Quinn, we've got to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That'd just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.